Welcome to Meet the South Bend Tribune Photograph Collection. My name is Ellen Anderson. I am a local and family history librarian at the St. Joseph County Public Library, and we are very excited to share this collection with you. It's been made possible by so many organizations. We really appreciate the support of the South Bend Tribune in the donation of these materials and supporting our digitization project. We thank the State Library for their help with the grant process that made this project possible, as well as the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which provides the funding for the grants. So let's take a look at what we started with when we were taking this collection that was donated to us and bringing it into the digital collection. We started with materials that look something like this, although they were maybe not quite as nice and pristine as these gray boxes are currently, but we started with a collection that looked something like this. It was in cabinets, it was in boxes, and it was housed in envelopes, and we were able to take some of these materials and turn them into a digital collection on our Michiana Memory Digital Collections website. Of course, this isn't the only collection on that site, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later, but if you've not explored the rest of the site, I encourage you to do so. So how did we get from all of those cabinets and boxes to this digital collection? So I wanted to talk a little bit first about the grant project and process that we went through. So this all started in 2019 when the South Bend Tribune donated their photograph negative collection to the library. They were anticipating downsizing and we're interested in seeing some of these materials, which they recognized the enormous value of, and bringing those online for the public to enjoy. So we were happy to be a part of that because we already have a great online digitization project available. So we were happy to make that part of our project. We started planning after moving into the Keller Park branch, which is our current temporary home while the main library is being renovated. We waited until that point when we had some time to review the materials and to begin to conceptualize what a digitization project might look like for this collection. We started to put together those kind of plans, and in 2020, although it was quite a difficult year, we were able to apply for and be awarded a Library Services and Technology Act grant through the Indiana State Library, which is provided by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So that helped us carry out our grant project. We got started right away, and we've been working all the way up through September 1st when our digital collection went live on the Michiana Memory website. So, but those last two steps on the timeline, there was a lot that happened in between there. So to break that down even a little further, we started by selecting and preparing the materials. We didn't have a great sense of what was in the collection when we first received it. So we went through the materials, reviewed them, thought about what kind of themes and types of materials we were most interested in targeting for digitization. As you could see from those pictures of the cabinets at the beginning, there were many, many, many more materials than we could possibly hope to bring online. So we had to be very selective in our process. We took our selected negatives and we transferred them into archival containers. You saw those gray boxes as opposed to the original yellowed cardboard boxes they arrived in. So we were able to move those into archival containers and archival quality envelopes to help preserve them. We added barcodes and created an inventory, which helped us track what was being sent away. Then we sent them out to a vendor to help with capture. They were able to use specialized equipment to very efficiently capture every different style of negative and to return those digital files to us. And then we set about processing those. We were able to do some quality review to make sure that we had the best quality images returned. We did some organization into digital batches, small batches, so that we could work on them in chunks. 10,000 images is an awful lot of images to work on, so we had to break them down into groups. We added watermarks and created derivative copies that would work best on the website. And then in the last step, we worked on some metadata and uploads. So our staff and some volunteers created descriptive metadata for each item so that it would be fully searchable. We took the news clippings, which we also digitized, and were able to generate transcriptions of them so they would also be searchable. And then finally, we imported and uploaded all of those web items to our website and hit the publish button. So they're there now. Our digital collection now contains just over 10,000 images that come from about 1,600 different envelopes. So you saw all those envelopes in those first few pictures. Most of those envelopes contained multiple items, multiple negatives, multiple clippings. So that's how we ended up with 10,000 images out of 1,600 envelopes we selected. And then they span about 1950 to 1990, and I put an asterisk there because there's a little bit of the collection that goes before 1950, and we'll get to those. I'll show you some of those in a few minutes. So to break that time frame down even further, about a third of the collection comes from the 1950s and the 1960s, and then about a quarter comes from the 70s, and then just under 15% from the 80s and 90s. And I lumped those together because I think we only have 2 envelopes from 1990, and that's it for the 90s. And then about 1% comes from pre-1950s, and that includes some earlier negatives, but also includes some negatives that were photographs of photographs. So somebody had brought in an old photograph of something from the 1800s, and at some point, someone from the Tribune photographed that to make a new negative. And we counted those towards the older materials because even though the actual physical object is more recent, maybe from the 60s or 70s, the contents of the image are much older. So we felt it was most appropriate to put those in that category. And this kind of breakdown was mostly by design. We focused on the oldest images in the collection because they were the items most at risk for deterioration, and also contained some of the most interesting contents because they represent things in a large part that are not in existence anymore. So we were most focused on those older items in the collection to really bring those out. So here's an example of some of the oldest and I think the most interesting items in the collection. In the process of reviewing the collection, I stumbled across a small group of glass negatives from the 1930s. And they were labeled 1937, but in doing some research on them, I was able to determine that at least some of them, if not all of them, actually dated from 1932 because some of them were published in the newspaper at that time. So they were from the opening of the new South Bend Tribune radio broadcasting station. So you get some of the radio equipment and library, as well as the radio tower. So those were very, very interesting. And they were the only glass negatives in the collection, which were pretty cool. And then there's a few other these are some examples of the types of older things that are in the collection. For example, on the right, there's a photograph of a photograph like I was talking about. Someone brought in a picture of the standpipe from 1873, and they put it down on a copy stand and took a picture of it to get a nice copy. So even though the actual negative was probably from the 60s or 70s, the contents of the photograph are much older. You can even see where they've used magnets to weight it to a surface so that they can get a nice flat copy of it. And then on the right, there was a small envelope of negatives from 1935 when FDR visited South Bend. And there was a piece of paper stuck in the envelope that said, "Do not open," even though it was already open. So we were pretty excited to find something like that in the collection. It's hard to tell if these are originals or if they've been copied. But those were pretty neat finds. So we made sure to put those in our digitization group. So what other things affected our selection of negatives to digitize? We really focused on looking for places. We know that that's a huge part of what people are interested in for local history in South Bend, seeing pictures of buildings and areas that have changed dramatically over the years. We also looked for people and then just broader community celebrations, and there's a lot of those represented in this collection. More specifically, we were interested in things that have changed over time, landscapes that have changed, had new development or had demolitions, historical sites that are lost. A lot of old buildings have been demolished over the years. We looked for some of the milestone events that people really are touchstones into the South Bend historical timeline. Things like the bicentennial or Studebaker closing were big points that people think about in South Bend's history. This was also a fantastic opportunity for us to improve representation of groups that are not very well represented in the types of materials that normally make it into our collections. We're usually looking at history books in the library, and a lot of groups are just not included in local history books or any history books. So we thought this was a great opportunity to go through the collection and ensure that we improved how those groups are represented in our collection. And then just everyday life, showing how life in South Bend has changed over the years. So these were some of the things that we looked for when we were selecting materials to include. And when we kind of looked at the collection as a whole at the end, these were some of the most common themes that came up in the materials that we selected. So these are just some of the topics that come up the most often. Of course, these are not the only topics that come up, but they are some of the most popular. And these actually, all 36 of these topics on this list, were made into clickable searches on the collection's homepage. So if you're just interested in browsing some of these topics, you'll be able to just click into them and then start browsing. And that was really something we wanted to make sure was possible with this collection being so large. It was really important to us that it was easy to browse for people who aren't very familiar with our website. So these are some of the things that are browsable. Of course, like I said, these are not the only things that appear in this collection. So if you have a more niche topic in mind, I encourage you to try out searching and other browsing that can help you find what you're looking for. When you're thinking about searching for something in the collection, it's good to know what kind of data and details are included about each image. So here's some of the information, we call this metadata, that was included about every image in this collection. As much as possible, we aimed to include these things where we knew them. So for each image, we created a title, and that was usually a brand new title that was combined from the information in the clipping, the information printed on the outside of the envelope that the negatives were in, and then just what the staff member was able to see in the images. And we tried to select a title that addressed the contents of the photographs as much as we could. And maybe not necessarily the theme of the news story or the reason that the news story was created, but focused on what was visible in the images and what its contents were, what those contents were. We tried to include a date as much as possible. There are, I think, only a handful that we were unable to find or narrow dates for. We then also included a time period, and I'll show you a little bit later how helpful that is for browsing. We applied subject headings, and this is what helped us create those list of topics that I showed on the previous slide. Even if you're not very familiar with what subject headings are or how they work, they helped us group images together, and there is a way that you can use those to browse the collection as you are taking a look at it. We also created descriptions. Again, we created these descriptions from scratch using contents in the subject on the envelope, using the clipping information, using what we could see in the images. We tried to put together a description that focused on what was being shown, and then also tried to use keywords that would help bring in things that are visible, even if they are not the subject of the photograph. So wherever possible, if we saw, like, if we were photographing a business, but else down the street, you could also see other businesses, we tried to mention those in the description to help improve the searchability of the collection. Wherever there was a clipping, we were able to generate a transcription of that clipping. We have software that was able to automatically generate, and we could review the accuracy of those generated clipping transcriptions. If known, we included the name of the photographer under the creator field. This was mostly the case for the later photographs in the collection, Most of the earlier photographs in the collection did not list a photographer specifically, but where we knew it, we included that. We also included the film type. So there are a number of different sizes of film in this collection, and we tried to mention that, or we did mention that for every image. And then there's also a unique identifier, and this may not be very useful when you're doing an initial search, but if you find an image you're interested in and you want to hang on to it or come back to it later, or if you have a question about an image and you want to contact the library, this unique identifier is a way that we can pick out a specific image in the collection. So if you make note of that and communicate that to us, or go back and search it later, it will make sure that we're all on the same page about what image you're talking about. So that is an important field if you are asking questions about an image or finding it later. We've been talking about what's in the digital collection, but before we go any further, I want to talk about what's not in the digital collection. So there's an awful lot of images in this collection. As I showed you, that collection in the cabinets and the boxes is far larger than we could possibly have digitized every item. So we estimate now that there are probably about 1 million images in the collection. And with that information, we think that we've digitized maybe about 1% of the overall collection. So even though we've put a number of images online, there's still more to find. And if you have an interest in a topic that's not covered in the digital collection, there may still be images in the physical collection that cover what you're interested in. So I did want to share a little bit about the physical collection so that you are aware of what we have and how you can access those. We will be opening the rest of the collection for research once the main library reopens in November. So if you are interested in seeing some of the images that are not digitized, we'll be able to help you reference those very soon. So here's a breakdown of how the physical collection is organized. We divided it into 3 offices because that's how the materials were arranged when we received them. So there's materials from the South Bend office. This is the largest group by far. Most of the cabinets and boxes came from the South Bend office. But there was also a Mishawaka office from the 50s to the 80s. So it was in a few cabinets and we have transferred those into boxes. And then there was one box that covered WSBT, radio, and TV, which is where those glass negatives came from. We further broke down the South Bend office into a few subseries because it was arranged in 3 different ways when we received it, and we have left it in that original organization. There were the filing cabinets, which were organized by subject. There were boxes, those gray boxes, which were organized by subject as well, and those 2 series of subjectly organized materials run concurrently, so they overlap. And then there are also a series of filing cabinets organized chronologically, and that represented a point where the Tribune changed how they were organizing their internal library from that subject to chronological. And when we were selecting materials to digitize, we used all of the series in our collection except for those chronological cabinets. Those chronological cabinets span between 1990 and 1999. And because of the way they're organized, they were a little difficult to browse. Also because they are organized chronologically, they contain the newest materials in the collection, which we were really hoping to target the oldest materials that are most at risk for deterioration, and some were already beginning to deteriorate. So for this project, we have focused on the older materials and left the chronological cabinets alone. They also contained a lot of color negatives, and color negatives represented a whole different capture process. So that was gonna create some problems for us. So we didn't pull from those for digitization. That's not to say that we wouldn't in the future choose materials from those groups to digitize, but we just didn't for this project. So, but they do make for easy target searching. If you know something was in the paper on a particular day, it's pretty easy for us to get into those. So if you have something in mind in that time period, we may still be able to find it for you. There are also a lot of different types of materials in this collection, and not all of those made it into the digital project. There were all sizes of negatives, from medium, 5x7, 4x5 were very common in the 50s and 60s. 120 format were more common in the 70s. And then 35 millimeter are most of the later materials. And then most of the envelopes had news clippings in them, which we also digitized. And then there are a small group of 4x5 color transparencies. Again, I said we weren't doing color in this project because it was just a whole different process. But the color transparencies were mostly created as kind of stock photos style photographs that were used on the cover of the Michiana magazine, Sunday magazine. So there's a few of those color transparencies in there. Actually, I'll show you, we only chose one of those to be digitized, and it serves as our cover image for the collection landing page, the paper boy with his stack of papers. But the rest of them were pretty much stock photo style photos, so they didn't really speak to the local history themes that we were hoping to get for the digital project. So these were the formats that were included in the digital project. We didn't include any of the 5x7 negatives, mostly because those were either related to sporting events, which we kind of de-emphasized in our selection, especially like Notre Dame football games. And also a lot of the 5x7 negatives were licensed photos, mostly Associated Press type photos. And then again, I said we didn't include the color transparencies. This collection does have a finding aid, and if you aren't familiar with finding aids, they're a tool that libraries and archives can use to help researchers access materials that are in a closed collection and aren't open to the public for browsing, but are open for research. So finding aids describe the materials in a collection and its history, how it's been processed, how it came into the possession of the library, and our finding aid also includes an inventory of all of the containers, not all of the items, but it does describe the contents of each container in our collection. So if you are interested in searching for something that's not digitized, the finding aid is going to be a really big help in understanding what we hold and what part of the collection it might be in, so that when you talk to our staff, we can help advise on which materials to search. So you'll be able to find the finding aid on the collection landing page on the Michiana Memory site. It's linked there. Easy to download if you'd like to browse it offline. And it's a really useful tool for understanding this collection. So if you have not visited the collection yet, all of our digital collections are located at michianamemory.sjcpl.org. I'm going to get into a live demo of the site in just a few minutes, but first I wanted to point out some of the features of the various site pages and navigation using some screenshots. So if you visited the site when it's not experiencing technical difficulties, this is the landing page that you will arrive in. It shows all of the collections that our site holds, not just the Tribune photographs, which are in that upper right corner, but it shows all of our other collections. If you haven't taken a look at some of these collections, I really encourage you to do so. They include very interesting and useful historical materials outside of just photographs. We have arts and architecture, which does include a lot of local photographs. Business and industry has a lot of company newsletters. We have postcards. We have a few short run newspapers. We are very, very close to having a full run of Central High School yearbooks, but we also have some other yearbooks on there. And then just a lot of other materials. We have a couple of collections that we worked with the IUSB and the Civil Rights Heritage Center to put together, the LGBTQ collection and the Civil Rights and African American History collection. So if you've not checked out anything other than the photographs collection, I do encourage you to browse through the site and take a look at what else we have. So when you click on that collection icon, you will arrive at this landing page. This is that color transparency I was talking about earlier with our South Bend Tribune paperboy and his stack of papers. I thought that was a great picture to use as the cover image on this collection. It tells you a little bit about the collection and the grant project that brought it to life. It talks a little bit about copyright, although if you use the email address listed there, our staff are happy to help you find better resources for understanding the copyright of this collection. There's a link to that finding aid that I just showed you. Those pink letters will, if you click on the words finding aid, it will take you to the finding aid on the collection. And then all of those 36 kind of popular themes that I pointed out earlier are there and clickable. So each of those lines is clickable and will take you to a pre-made search where we've put together some various subject headings that speak to a similar theme and will help you find images related to that theme. But if you just want to get into the full collection, you can use that Browse All button at the very bottom of the page, and that will take you to a search results page of the full collection. So if I do that, it takes me to the collection. You can see up in this corner here that I'm looking at records 1 to 20 of 1592. So that's where those 1600 envelopes come from. A few other features of this page, if you are new to using our site, there is a way that you can change how the search results display. You can change the sort, you can change whether you're seeing thumbnails or a list view, and you can change how many results display on the page. You can also navigate through the pages using arrows or clicking on the page number that you want to go to. If you have a very particular page number you want to go to, you can type that in on the right and hit that arrow and it will take you to that page. On the left at the bottom under the collections section there, there are some what we call facets that allow you to narrow your search results based on clicking on the options there. The options under subject headings and time periods sort by the frequency. And so you could click on any of those subject headings to limit your search to just items with that subject heading. Same with the time period, you can just get a glimpse at the bottom that it shows that the time period is clickable there, and that's a big tool to help with browsing if you have something specific, a specific time period you're interested in images from. If you look at an individual search result, you'll see a thumbnail of the first image in the grouping, but I will point out that that's not the only image in each grouping. Each of these search results represents a whole envelope of pictures. It could just be one image, but it could be 100 images. It could be no clippings, one clipping, could be 15 clippings. So there's a lot more to see behind that search result if you click through it. There's the title of the grouping. There is the original date, as much as it's known. For example, you can see here we've got a full date, but you can also see this last one on the page only has a year because we didn't have an exact date that those images were taken on the, provided on the envelope they came from. It tells you how many images and clippings are in each group, so you know before you click what kind of quantity you're looking at, and then the description is included. If you click through to a search result, you'll see the search, the item page. It tells you what item you're looking at. It also gives you the opportunity to navigate between the search results that you just came from. So for example, I clicked on the 17th item in this listing, but if I clicked those arrows forward or back, it would take me to result number 16 or 18. And then there's also a link there to take you back to your full search results list. You can also use the back bar or back button in your browser. That's another way to do that. The description, the metadata for each item is listed below. So it gives you all the details that we've entered about each item, including those subject headings, the description, the title, even some more technical data about how it was reproduced and what collection it's in. There's some information there about copyright as well. All kinds of data, and then even that identifier, that unique identifier is listed there as well. In the upper right corner of the image preview, it will take you to an expanded view of the image, which I'll show you in a minute. But that if you want to zoom in, get a closer look, if you click on those little arrows facing away from each other, it will expand it to a full screen image and give you the chance to rotate it or to zoom in. You can also navigate through the search results using the search bar within each record. This will, because there's no text on these images, it will only search the clippings if there are any. but sometimes that's still useful. You can see that this group of images has more than can fit on this thumbnail list. So the first 10 are here, but there are 19 images and 5 clippings, so it spans 3 pages. So you can navigate using those arrows at the bottom. And then final thing to point out on this page is in that upper right, but above the searching within the record is an opportunity to download or to print. And if you click those, they will drop down and give you the option of what size you want to print or what size you want to download. There are different size options based on what you want to do with it. So if I did click that expand button in the image, upper right corner of the image, this is the expanded view. And from here, I could use my mouse wheel to zoom in. I can also use the plus and minus buttons in the upper left to zoom in. I can use the rotate arrow if I wanted to rotate the image a different direction. And then in the upper right corner of this view, I can also navigate between the pages of the image. So since there are 19 images, I could just keep clicking through and not have to toggle back and forth between the page, the item view and the expanded view. And then you can also X out of this preview in the corner there. If I were to move through this image or this group of images and get to a clipping, for example, you can see that there's a clipping there. And I just wanted to bring this up to show that it also brings up the transcription. So this is where the transcription of each clipping would show up if there was one. I can't show you about this site without showing you the searching. You've seen in the upper left corner the whole time on that navigation bar that there is an advanced search option. You can just type right into that search bar. It will search the collection that you're in currently or the whole site if you're on the home page. But my recommendation is that using the advanced search is the best way to find something specific, especially going into a particular collection and using the advanced search, because it delivers much better results when you search one collection at a time. That's just a quirk of the site. It's much easier to search one collection at a time. So you can see here that on this advanced search page, I have selected the South Bend Tribune photograph collection as the only one I want to search. And then it gives me the option to do things like select a field to search or just search all the fields. There is a date line at the bottom there. You see enter date. Our metadata does not play very well with that field, so I don't recommend putting that date field to use. If you do have a date in mind or a year in mind, I would use the middle search term option, and there is a date field when you use this dropdown. So that's the best way if you want to do a date search to do that. I would ignore this part. We are going to go into a live demo of the site in just a minute, but I did want to point out that this collection does have some copyright restrictions, and that's just part of our agreement with the Tribune. We were very fortunate that such recent materials could be made available online, but that does come with some restrictions because they are still copyrighted images. So you are welcome to download or print a copy of an image for personal study or educational use. You can share a link to an item if there's an item that you want to share with other people. You can use the link to that item from your browser bar to share. But you do need to be aware that there are some limitations, that if you are going to publish it online or offline, if you're going to post an actual image or sell an image on any kind of product, you would need permission from the South Bend Tribune to do that. So the library can help with getting in contact with them if you have a question or want to request permission for something. You can get in touch with us and we will put you in touch with someone at the Tribune that can help you with that. We do have a way to help with offering copies of images that are better quality than what's downloadable. There are some different permissions required and some different things required on our end, depending on what type of image you want, whether a watermark is okay or you want a non-watermarked image, whether you want something that's already digitized or something that hasn't been digitized out of the physical collection. So I won't go into all the details, but if you have questions about getting a copy of an image that's better than the copy you can download from Michiana Memory, get in touch with us and we will be happy to tell you what is involved and required for each of those options. So, okay, let's go into the site. So here we are on the Michiana Memory homepage, which I just showed you a minute ago. And this is where you can see the South Bend Tribune collection there in the corner. I wanted to do a few example searches so that you can see some of the different things you can do with this collection since there are so many images in it. Although if you have questions, this is a great time to start putting those in the chat so I can keep an eye on those. But I will do a few searches in this collection. So you can see we're on that homepage. Of course, my monitor is so big that it really blows up this image. But all of those clickable searches are there, and that is an easy way to get into an individual topic if you have an interest. So for example, if I was interested in seeing presidential visits or things related to presidents in South Bend, which there are a surprising number in our history, I can click on that search and it actually opens it in a new tab, which makes it very easy if you decide that this is not a search you're interested in. You can just X out of that and go right back to the page you were on previously. So I can see here that we've got 20 images or 20 groups of images related to presidents, and there are a lot of them. So if you have an interest in seeing those, you can. Not all of them are visits. You can see there were local memorial services held for JFK. So they're not all visits, but things related to presidents. So if I didn't want to keep looking at that, I can just X out of this tab and go right back to the collection landing page. This also gives me a link out to the finding aid, which works the same way. It opens in a new tab. So there is information about the collection and the copyright, but I can just go into that browse all and see all of those images there. So if I were going to do a couple searches, let's say that I had an interest in, I knew one of my ancestors was in the newspaper. So I am going to click on that advanced search in the upper left. I'm going to deselect all of the collections and then just select the South Bend Tribune photograph collection and save that choice. And then that will let me search in other fields. But I think that in this case, I'm just going to do an all field search. So for example, I'm going to throw a name in here that I know appears in this collection. And I can do a search. And it brings up one record here. You see that the name that I put in is not in the title of the image, but it does appear in two other places because we transcribed the clippings. It appears in one of the clippings. So I can see that it appears in one of the clippings here, and it also appears in the description of the image because we, wherever we could, we tried to take names that appeared in clippings and bring them into the description to improve searching for those names. So there's an example of that. Other things that I might be interested in looking for in this collection, go back out to my search page. For example, if I were interested in seeing every picture that was along Western Avenue, I can definitely put in Western Avenue here and do a search and bring up everything that includes Western Avenue in its description or its clippings, or any kind of way that it might appear, it will show up in this list. Another thing I might look for is something that you can do with a search like this is you can add other search terms. So something that I noticed in this collection is that Lincoln Way is spelled multiple ways in different images. So I can put in Lincoln Way, or I can put in Lincoln Way. And here it asks me how I want to connect these search terms. I can change this from and, which means both search terms need to appear. I can change it to or, and then either one can appear in the search result and I can still find it. So if I do a search on that, I will get, of course, I've not spelled link incorrectly, so I've missed out on my other search results. You can see I get 65 search results here. And then the search terms that I entered appear right here at the top, and they have X's by them. So if I decide that I want to narrow my search to only one spelling or the other, I can remove it from my search by just clicking that, and it will update. And so now you can see I've lost a couple entries. I've now gone from 65 to 63 because 2 of those didn't include the spelling. So other things I can do with my advanced search, I can clear that row and it will no longer include it in my search. One thing that I was hoping that could become a clickable option along the side of the screen, but we couldn't find a way to include it, was the names of the photographers. So if you want to find someone's whole body of work in this collection, for example, one of the photographers that appears often is Ron Ryback. I can put him in here. I know that he appears in this collection as both Ronald and Ron, so I only put in his surname, and I will move that to the creator field, searching only the creator field, and that will bring up all of the places where he is acknowledged as the creator. So there's 21 images in this group that are all identified as being his work. So that's another way to use the advanced search to search in a specific field. Something else I can do here is to search by a date. So I talked about how this date field at the bottom doesn't play well with our metadata. So a good way to do that would be to use the original date. I can just put in a year and it will bring up everything that includes that year, even if it has more of a specific date. But in this case, let's try a specific date. So let's see, on this day we use 8-character dates. So 09 is going to be September, and we use a year, month, day. So getting progressively narrower date format. If you are trying to find a specific date, that's how to format your dates. So if I put in September 18th, 1956, and I do a search, I will bring up one thing that is identified. That was today in South Bend history, was the Toll Road Dedication Parade. So there are 9 images here of the various floats and participants in the Toll Road Dedication Parade. There's a clipping. Okay, so that's some examples of searching. If anyone has any questions, this would be a great time to put those in the chat. I would be happy to answer some of those. So I'm going to go back to the homepage here. There's a question about whether there are plans to digitize items that have not been digitized already. We are open to a future digitization project related to this collection. We don't have any plans, but that's not to say that there isn't a possibility. And we are also open to keeping this collection updating over time. So if patron requests or certain thematic events, anniversaries, things like that, bring up additional relevant images, there's definitely a possibility that we could add to the collection as new things come up, or as we find images or themes that are being commonly requested. So the collection may grow over time in small ways. Okay. So if you have any questions about this collection as you are digging into it, or you have questions about the presentation or anything, we are able to be reached at our email address is local.history@sjcpl.org, and our phone number is 574-282-4621. We are very excited about this collection, and we're very happy to help you make use of it, because we think that this is just really exciting and valuable photographs of South Bend history. Thank you so much for attending, and we hope you enjoy the photographs.